Evening everybody. It is Thursday, 24th of November, and got to do this pretty quickly because I need to edit and upload it for tonight, for today's dram. So I'll do another quick one afterwards to give me a run on for tomorrow as well. So, Speyside, still working our way through alphabetically just about, because I'm having to tweak a few bits and pieces because of various reasons, like doing joint tastings when technology works or doesn't work. So we're at I. We've done all the Glens, because there are a lot of Glens. And we're now at I for Inchgower. And this particular sample, you'll see, is actually only half full, because the other half was drunk by Andrew A.P. Butler, who supplied the donation. I should give a thank you to Jim Urquhart as well, who is somebody I've come across who lives in the village, keen whiskey drinker, who actually bought the same miniature pretty much. No, it might have been a slightly different one. It was still an Inchgower, and I think it was a Gordon MacPhail similar to this, when he was up in Scotland earlier on this year. But because Andrew's was open, I've given that one back to him. But Jim, thanks anyway for grabbing it for me. So Inchgower, another relatively obscure Speyside distillery. It's here in a fishing village called Buckie. Buckie, not Bucky as in Bucky O'Hare, if you are of my age and watched kids' cartoons. And it actually, there was another distillery nearby, a few miles away, called Tochineel. That was built in 1824 and closed down a few years before Inchgower was set up in 1871. So you're sort of talking late 1860s, mainly because the water source, they couldn't get a decent water source. So quite a bit of the distillery equipment from Tochineel was actually used in the building of Inchgower, which was in Buckie. Much better water source, actually two water sources they could use. Can't remember the names of them, doesn't really matter. It was a company called Alexander Wilson and Co. who built the distillery and were basically doing a pretty good job of it. Managed to survive through the Pattinson crisis at the turn of the century. They had their own cooperage, they had their own forge. They even had some housing in the distillery for workers to live in. So it was a pretty self-sufficient distillery. It was doing pretty well by itself. But unfortunately, Alexander Wilson and Co. still went bankrupt in 1936. And the Buckie Town Council purchased the distillery as part of the bankruptcy procedures. And they paid 1,600 quid, which obviously back in 1936 was a fair amount of money. Bought it off as part of the whole proceedings, and then sold it to Arthur Bell and Sons of the Bell's brands 2 years later, 1938, for £3,000. So they pretty much doubled the money. Good business, Buckie Town Council, well done. And it has stayed within Bell's stroke UDV stroke Guinness stroke Diageo. It is still part of Diageo, and it is a fairly key part of Bell's, Johnny Walker and White Horse. So basically 1% of their entire output is sold as a single malt, so it's really hard to get hold of. There's never been an official bottling of Inchgower as such. The nearest you can get, which is sort of an official bottling, is the Flora and Fauna range, part of Diageo. I think it's a 14-year-old. I don't know how prevalent that is, how easy that is to get hold of. So most Inchgower that you find will be independent bottlings, and even then there's not that much of it. So this particular one looks like this. It's from Gordon MacPhail. It's part of their Connoisseur's Choice range. So it's not a single cask bottling. It's bottled at 43% as well. So it's a few casks. It's a 1993, which again annoyingly doesn't say on the label, but it's 2008. I'm reading as. Now I will probably, because I've done this a couple of times before, having done this, go and find the picture of the bottle, put it up, and it'll have the label on, and it won't actually say what I think it is, which is 2008. It will probably say a completely different year, but everywhere I'm reading is saying that this is 1993 to 2008. So depending on the months, 14, 15-year-old. And that's really about it. That's all I've got on this. Not a great deal, because it's, it just chugs along making whiskey for much bigger brands. And that's all they need to do. So they don't need to sell a lot of it as single malt because it's already going to get used. Absolutely perfect 25ml, Andrew. Thank you very much, sir. Hup. So Gordon MacPhail don't use any colouring, and this is pretty pale, you can probably see, even for a 15-year-old. Now I don't know what casks they're matured in. I think sherry casks, I read somewhere, but I could be completely wrong. But it's not particularly deep and dark for a 15 year old. It's quite light. It really is quite a light white wine colour. Interesting. It's it's hay, but it's dry hay. It's not a wet hay. It's not foisty. It's quite a dry hay and spice, but it's again a dry spice, and it's not quite smoky, but it's sort of got this aridness about it. There's something in there. It kind of like stones as well. It's a really unusual nose, and you could I could understand if somebody said it's smoky, but it's not. It's not a smokiness. It's not a bonfire. It's a dryness. It's a dry feel to it. It's unusual. Really unusual. It reminds me of something like a very dry grappa, that sort of nose, where it's not harsh. It's clean. It's a very clean nose, but I'm trying to think of another word apart from bloody dry, because that's the overriding sensation I'm getting from a nose. But it's like a stones on the riverbank, but that have dried out in the sun. It's weird. It's a weird nose, and it's kind of hay, and there is a dry spice in there as well. It's very, very unusual. It's nice, but it's so odd. Okay, well, let's see what palate's like. Fortunately, it's sweeter. I think it would almost be, if the palate was like the nose, it would be quite acrid. But this has got, it's very silky. It's quite a full mouthfeel. It's quite creamy as well. There really is quite a creamy element to it. There's a slight dryness of nuts as well. Is that what's on the nose? No, it's not. No, it's not nuts. It's kind of like dried cut grass, but really dry. When it's almost starting to like turn brown in the sun, and dry hay. It's most unusual. But on the palate, it's quite creamy and soft, and there's not really any element of that smoke that's not smoke that's on the nose. There's a distinct sweetness to it, but it's a very milky, creamy sweetness. Very pleasant, very easy to drink. There's a nice bite at the back as well, and I think that's probably partly to do with the fact it's 43%. I think if it was 40, it would tail off a bit quickly. But there's just a little bit of a bite. It just lifts right at the end as you swallow, and it just perks everything back up, and it's really well balanced. There's not a huge amount of flavour to it. It's quite difficult to pick out any individual flavours, like fruit or cherry or anything like that. It's kind of just a flow of kind of a milky, creamy sweetness with a slight oak and then a bit of a spark at the end. But it's very, very pleasant. It's very nice to drink indeed. It's so hard to pick the flavours out. It's quite a light fruitiness. We're talking poached pear, but really poached pear to the point where it's almost all the pear flavours gone. It's very, very subtle, very light. It's a very spring whiskey. It really is. It would be a nice spring summer whiskey, slightly chilled even, out the fridge, that sort of thing. Very, very pleasant. Not massively complex. Probably a little bit too light and delicate for some people. And I can understand that. But that is very pleasant. That would go down a treat with pretty much any whiskey drinker, unless you're looking for something with oomph and complexity and power and all this lot. It's not. This is the other end of the scale. This is light and soft and delicate and creamy and milky and very, very easy to drink. Very easy to drink. I like that. I do like that a lot. Now, in terms of how much it is, no idea. the Whisky Shop are listing it. Whisky Exchange is listing it. Master and Malt are listing it. They're all saying discontinued, out of stock. I cannot find a price for this at all. So if anybody does know, if anybody's found it anywhere, please do let me know, because I would probably hazard a guess at about 50 quid, which is not a bad price. I would pay 40 to 50 quid for that. I think that's very, very pleasant indeed. I think some people might pay 40, 50 quid for that and go, it's not a great deal to it, but it's not too bad at all. Right, relatively quick one, quick rinse out, another quick one, and then I can get cracking. I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.